what I like to see is this, little things that you may have not thought about, but when you see them, it's like it's super smart. So making things easy for the guys who will be on the roofs or on the facade to do the work. And that's by working on that we can make BIPV mainstream. And I start to see those things being addressed. And I think it will be even more the case in the years to come. So I'm quite excited about that.
Building integrated photovoltaics, in short BIPV, is still a niche on the PV market. But recently its market share has been growing ever since manufacturing costs can be lowered. Now, rooftop PV with BIPV characteristics, where piles of a roof are substituted by PV modules, are gaining momentum. But despite the growing momentum, manufacturing costs are still the defining variable that hinders BIPV to go fully mainstream in its application. In this episode, you'll learn everything about BIPV and also its current market developments and manufacturing prices. Welcome yet again to our yearly special mini-series of the Smarter E podcast, recorded live here in Munich during the Smarter E conference and exhibition 2024. We made sure to get some of the most interesting international experts and industry representatives and talk to them about the most exciting trends and developments while creating the renewable energy system of the future. Once again here, using the opportunity of recording this session live at the Smarter E 2024, I made sure to get an international expert on everything BIPV, Philippe Macé, partner and chief operating officer at the Becquerel Institute, a European strategic consultancy and applied research company specializing in photovoltaic solar energy. Welcome, Philippe.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Philippe, I know you've traveled all the way from Brussels to be here in Munich. You are already an expert in BIPV, but have you learned something new here at the Smarter E Europe? Have you found actually some companies specializing in BIPV?
Yes, in fact, I've seen quite a few and quite a few new ones as well, which is interesting from Europe, but also from China, doing, I would say, not fully innovative because maybe I'm too knowledgeable on that, but very interesting stuff on coloring, different shapes. And also people are more and more working on optimizing little things that goes beyond the aesthetics, like how to make things easy for the guys who will install the BIPV modules, or how can optimize the performance of the BIPV modules installed on roofs or facades. So yeah, many interesting things to be seen in the exhibition. And we see that it's really a maturing sector.
So tell me, for those of us who are not really familiar with building integrated PV, what do I need to know about it and what is its relevance?
Well, first, BIPV is a quite broad term. It's quite generic, and also it can vary from one country to another. If I just stick to Europe, there is some now common definition, and we can simply interpret it as component that replaces a component that is part of the building envelope, which means that if you remove a BIPV module, you have to replace it by a common building envelope solution. Otherwise, you are damaging the water tightness or the air tightness or sound barriers that, makes the building a building. So that's the first thing to have in mind. And then having that in mind, when we talk about BIPV, we have many solutions. We often think about solar tiles for roofs, but BIPV, it's also solar glazing for facades, solar glazing for balustrades, solar glazing for shading devices. There are many types of BIPV. And what we mostly see here at Intersolar, it's the more mainstream one. So the one that is really aiming at roofs. Because when we look at BIPV for facade, it's often tailor-made. And it's also not only because of aesthetic requests by the architects or the project owners, but also because it's also often quite restrictive on the normative point of view. But so yeah, today here at Intersolar, I saw mostly roofs BIPV solutions.
Just for me to understand it properly, when you say restrictive on the normative point of view, that is because it is an integral part of the facade or the roof. Yes. And it has to go along with compliance and building legislation.
Yes. All the building codes and technical specifications you have to follow when you are installing PV elements. as part of the building envelope solutions, well, it's literally much more restrictive than when we talk about a simple PV module.
Now, you said it could be found anywhere in the building, really on the roof. And I guess everybody can just imagine a normal roof tile looking like a roof tile, but having PV functionality. Or, of course, in a glass facade, windows having PV embedded, or the non-part of the facade also having PV embedded. I guess that really brings a high level of customization with it. And that, again, makes it more difficult in terms of pricing. Because, of course, it's always easy and it's always best to aim for streamlining things, to go for mass production. So what is the price ratio there between highly customized BIPV components versus normal streamlined PV products?
That's a very difficult question because, as I said, there are many different types of BIPV. But if you are looking at the most competitive ones, which are the most standardized ones, it's still, it's in fact very competitive. But when we compare it face to face to regular PV modules, it may seem high, but in fact, it's really very competitive. So we can, at best, we could look at 2 or 3 times the production cost for mainstream BIPV solutions for roofs, for example, compared to conventional PV modules. And which is in fact very, very competitive because you have to think that this element, okay, it's 3 or 2 times at best the cost of a conventional PV modules, but it has more functions. It will not only replace the module, but it also will replace the ceramic tile, for example. So when you factor this in, it starts to become very, very competitive. And then when you look at, the fact that it will produce energy for 30 years or even more, then you have a attractive solution. That's for roofs. For facade, often the price gap, because of the constraints I was mentioning, is higher. You have the obligation to use often thicker glass, much thicker glass. You also have most of the time lower possibilities to standardize because you have requests by project owners to have different shapes, different size, different transparency level. So it means that for that module, even if it has the same size of the module right next to it, well, you will have twice as low PV cells because specifically for this area of the building, they wanted more light to get inside the building. So there, the sky is the limit. Sometimes it's really, 10 times more expensive. But again, you have to think about the fact that it's not only, acting as a PV module, it's a construction element. So it's replacing more than just a PV module. It's also replacing the usual glazing. And so when you compare solar glass to regular glass, then it starts to be, in fact, much less striking in terms of cost difference. And again, when you look at how much it will produce on its lifetime, then okay, the story is much different. And we have to educate people, not only in the solar sector, but in the construction sector, to see it as a building element. Okay, we are in solar. It's an active component, but it's mostly a building element, not a PV element. So we never ask a window or a brick to pay for itself. But we always ask the question when we talk about BIPV.
Does that actually mean that BIPV is not in competition with regular PV because it's only being used where normal PV wouldn't be installed in the first place?
Well, first answer to your question, yes, it's not in direct competition. But even if it can be installed on some areas where conventional PV can also be installed, like roofs. But let's say that it's never, there are just a few cases where you can actually have a direct competition. Just for example, no one will consider replacing the ceramic tiles of its roof unless there is an issue, so a technical issue, or it's very old, like 40, 50 years old. It's against also all economic or environmental logic. And so, in fact, BIPV and BAPV, so the conventional PV, will really enter into competition when we may have a huge retrofit or after a very long time of the roof life or at a new building moment. But for buildings that are less than 10, 20, even 30 years old, no one will consider BIPV because it wouldn't make sense to change the building envelope.
All right, that makes perfect sense. So Now that you're mentioning, there's so many different requests, even regarding one building, because it might look one way on the south facade, it might look a different way on the west facade, as you mentioned. Now, is there any potential to streamlining production? And if there is potential, would that be the key to the market growth for BIPV?
It's one of the keys, for sure, because streamlining and standardizing solutions can further bring costs down. It's not the only solution, but it is one of them. There are certainly a few applications where standardization makes a lot of sense, like, as I mentioned already, roofs. And that's what we are seeing here. We are seeing companies proposing standardized roofing solutions, solar tiles, or bigger solution like in-roof mounting solutions. So you can accommodate more conventional modules, but you can use them as a BIPV solutions, thanks to an adapted mounting system. But yeah, it's part of the solution, and we see it appearing on the market. We see new players providing standardized solutions and even scaling up their production because they can finally scale up because they have a standardized solution, and it creates synergies and it's lowering costs, but only for part of the BIPV market.
Now you hinted at the fact that streamlining might be one of several keys. So I assume there's a lot of other challenges and barriers yet to be solved for BIPV to really growing its market. Which would they be?
First, as I said already, educating actors from the construction sectors, from architects to real estate project developers to also the SMEs that are active in the roofing business. Those guys don't know most of the time about BIPV, and if they know, the perception is not always good. It seems costly, it seems complex. While it's not, it's today quite mature from a technical point of view and also quite mature from a cost point of view. So it's really, and it's been identified by actors of the BIPV sector. It's like, in the short term, the objective, educating people from the construction sector, showing them that installing BIPV is not more complex than installing a usual roofing. That's what also BIPV companies are working a lot on. It's like making it as simple as possible. So yeah, that's the key in the short term.
Now, since we're already talking about SMEs in the construction sector, I know there have been like 10 golden years for the construction business. Now they seem to be suddenly in a crisis. Does that crisis in the building sector have an effect on the BIPV market also?
Yes, in the sense that, as I mentioned, BIPV is a construction element, so it's being prescribed at moment of heavy renovation or new construction. So it's totally or almost totally reliant on the dynamics from the construction sector. And we see it, because of the inflation of cost and also labor shortage. We see that the momentum for the construction sector has decreased. We see less activity, and so it's also damaging the activity for the BIPV sector. But the BIPV sector has its own, I would say, arguments and advantages that can help it recover.
Which ones would that be?
It's a unique solution that has a dual use. It's and you can combine it even, and then you can talk about triple use. And I saw some of these solutions here at Intersolar. You can combine it with insulation layer. And we know that now with the regulation at European or national level, there is a big push for improving the energy performance of buildings, not only by producing locally renewable energy, but mostly and most importantly by reducing the energy demand of the buildings, by increasing the energy efficiency. And BIPV can be combined with these energy efficiency improvement solutions to propose a triple use solution, and that's can help it being more, resilient than the other part of the construction sector.
Since we're already talking about, legislations in various countries here in Europe, I heard that Switzerland has seemed to have been quite a pioneer in regards to BIPV. Why so, and what could we learn from it?
Yes, in fact, when we look at the figures, the BIPV market in Switzerland is quite developed, and it has always been the case. Mix of reasons there. First, there has always been some specific incentives for BIPV, direct or indirect, and which were pushed in fact by the fact that there is a scarce access to land. It's a quite mountainous country, obviously we all know that, and so we have to find first artificialized areas where we can put PV before thinking about, setting up utility scale ground-mounted PV plants. So building envelopes, roofs, but facade as well, have always been considered as potential areas for PV system installation. And so BIPV was always a big thing there. And we have demand, so on market side, but also we have also local providers that help creating some momentum for this sector in the country.
If we turn from Switzerland to the EU, is there enough political support or even already appropriate legislation to further its cause?
I would say it's okay for now. It can always be better, but it's not too bad in the sense that the European level regulation is already pushing for first improved energy performance of buildings, which can, with the side effect, benefit BIPV. Also improved or facilitating measures for the production of renewable energy locally, so at building level, should it be solar PV, or other technologies, which can also, as a side effect, benefit BIPV. So on the really policy side, it's okay. The real issue at European level comes from the building codes I was mentioning earlier. They are totally different from one country to another. So it's very difficult for components provider, again, and we're going back to the cost question, to scale up. So if you are a manufacturer of solutions for the German market, and you know that France is developing well, starting to offer your product in France may not be that easy. It will take some time. You will have to investigate the local regulation. You may have to run specific tests. So it's adding complexity, it's adding costs to the usual barriers. You have to develop a local sales network, create some relationship with the local stakeholders, and so on and so on. So it's a real issue, and that's in fact the question we always have from local European producers is, okay, can you help me enter this market, because I don't know anything about building codes there, and so on and so on. It's really a barrier for the BIPV market.
So it sounds like a cooperation amongst the various players and company in the BIPV market really is key to jointly make it possible to really enter those markets.
Yeah, and there is, it's still a niche. We mentioned that, so everybody knows each other. So there is already collaboration. They may lack simply the scale to bring their voice high enough. But it's a complex topic. It's really about safety. So it's not easy to just take a decision, okay, let's harmonize all building codes. Those building codes in some cases are different for good reasons, because we have different construction habits. So we have different local conditions, weather-wise, for example. So there is a reason behind these differences, but it doesn't mean that we cannot try to optimize or uniformize them. So, yeah.
Let's close with some numbers as an outlook and some technologies as an outlook. Numbers first. What do you think is the potential for BIPV here in Europe, and theoretically, and which of that potential will be realized in the next years? Are there any predictions?
The potential in theory is huge, at least in absolute numbers, because if we are looking at a market of a few hundreds of megawatt per year, it could be multiplied by 10, 20 easily within 10 years. Just because it's also benefiting from the growing wave of the PV sector as a whole. So the potential, I cannot give figures, but it's certainly in the tens of gigawatt scale.
And detailed question there, how is the ratio there divided between more roof BIPV or facade BIPV? Where's the bigger potential?
Depends how you look at it, in the sense that if you look at the usual units we are using in the PV sector, and that I said we shouldn't be too focused on PV, but in gigawatts and capacity, it will be roofs, certainly, simply because BIPV roof solutions are opaque, non-transparent, so you can stack as many cells as you want per unit of surface. So it means just more watt peak per square meter. While for BIPV roof solutions, at least for part of the market, you need to leave some space to let the light in the building, so lower watt peak. So on that side, certainly roof. But if you look at the square meter, it's quite balanced. And why? Because for a whole lot of building typologies, we simply have more available surface, or even available in the sense that existing surface on the facade than on the roof, like high-rise building, or not even high-rise, but simply if we look at multifamily buildings with 10 floors, for example, the ratio of the facade surface compared to the roof surface is to the advantage of the facade surface, but also because in that kind of building, roofs are also often used for other purposes. You need HVAC systems over there. You need some also security space that you cannot cover. So naturally, facade will be used for PV, as we will slowly start to be to have totally covered or use what can be used on roofs.
You were gonna say that how much of that potential will actually be realized in the next years?
Well, what we think is that it's not in the short term, it's more in the medium term that we will really exploit all the BIPV potential for various reasons. First, there is this question of suffering construction sector. So it will take some time before it recovers. And there are initiatives at European level like the renovation wave. But we know it takes time. There are ambitious objectives to improve the rate of renovation in all European countries, but it takes some time. And secondly, it's and I briefly mentioned it in the previous question, it's like, we tend to be rational. So first we will exploit the surfaces that are the easiest to exploit from a, technical difficulty point of view or cost point of view. And it's only after that we will really have to think about, the other more challenging surfaces where BIPV will be, a must.
Do you have a number?
Let's say that by the end of the decade, it's, if you look at this market as a S curve, the moment where this curve will start taking off, we are not there yet. It could happen around 2028, something like that, but not before.
Let's close it with a quick question. What are the most interesting technological developments that we might see at some of the Smarter E Europe conferences and exhibitions in the years to come? So what are you looking forward to?
More customization possibilities. We see a lot of coatings to adapt the color, but also adapt the pattern on the BIPV module. So you may see walls that look like brick or look like other type of usual material, but are in fact active PV modules. And then what I like to see is these, little things that you may have not thought about, but when you see them, it's super smart. And I was mentioning the optimization of the installation processes, for example, or maintenance processes. So making things easy for the guys who will be on the roofs or on the facade to do the work. And that's by working on that we can make BIPV mainstream. And I start to see those things being addressed. And I think it will be even more the case in the years to come. So I'm quite excited about that.
Thanks a lot for joining us today, Philippe. So that's been really interesting to get an insight into that. And you've heard it. If you want to know where BIPV is going, and there are a lot of innovations on the way, as Philippe just mentioned, make sure to visit us here at the Smarter E 2025. Looking forward to meeting you all there.
Thank you, and see you there.
Make sure to also check out all the other episodes of our special mini-series recorded live here in Munich during the Smarter E Europe conference and exhibition. And even better, join us for the Smarter E Europe in 2025. More information on thesmartere.de. Looking forward to meeting you.